Okay, welcome to the Underground. This is your host, Joe Black, again. Here we're doing a review on the book, Education Enigma. It's by Kevin Abdul Haq Stevenson and Octavius Talib. Uh, Welcome again, Kev.
Well, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So the first thing I want to ask you about the book, and if you could you just show the book? I have an e-copy, so it's not good. This is the book we're talking about right now, Education Enigma. It's available on Amazon. If you need help getting it, please let me know, and I can give you a link to where you can purchase the book. But it's interesting reading, and it's pretty relative to learning historical facts about our journey in this country. But first thing I want to know is why the title, Education Enigma?
Well, the title, The Education Enigma, came about after we visited the places, after we visited 17 places. And there is a dichotomy about the history of enslaved people in terms of education and freedom. You know, after Reconstruction, after slavery, the enslaved Africans, and Emancipation Proclamation freed them. And one of the two things we talked about this previously on one of your shows that African Americans did was look for their relatives and get education.
Okay.
The enigma is while they were trying to get education, because they thought education was the thing that would free them. They thought that education would level the playing field. The enigma is while they were trying to do this, they were being terrorized at the same time. Okay. So with white supremacy and the Klan and the John Birch Society, all these things going on in these different places that these enslaved Africans were trying to achieve education.
Okay. So, myself, as I've said before, my undergrad was in political science and a minor in history. So I'm a lover of history. And I've done my own little journey on some historical sites. I've went to every place that's affiliated with the Lincoln assassination, Ford Theater, the White House, Dr. Mudd's house, and Fort McNair, where some of the people were hung. Including, I've also been to oh my God, I can't even remember it. I can't remember right now. I'll get back to it. But I've been to almost every place except for Harper Ferry. So I know when I go to some of these places, I get an emotional feel. Like I said, I also went to, I was on the Air Force One that brought Kennedy's bodies back, and it gave me a little chill. And so just how did that part of it affect you guys when you were visiting these locations?
When we were visiting these places, let me just start at the beginning, because what we had planned to do was just take a vacation. Mm-hmm. I had recently retired, from the federal government, and my friend I'd known since the early 70s. We went to Hampton University together. It was Hampton Institute at the time. We had always planned to take a trip together after we had finished our careers, but with children and family and work and all kind of things happening, we couldn't get it done. So when I retired, he said, "Okay, brother, it's time to get this thing done. So let's just take a road trip together." So right. He said, I said, "Where do you want to go?" So he started naming places like the Grand Canyon and all these other, places that most people take their vacations to. And I was like, why don't we just do some historical sites down south? I like to go to South Carolina or North Carolina, go to some of these historical places of enslaved Americans. He said, well, he lives in Georgia. He said, well, I'm from Georgia. Let's go some other places. So what we did was we came up with 17 places. Let me read the 17 places that we decided to go to. We went to Carter G. Woodson's birthplace landmark in New Canton, Virginia, and paid close attention to the names of these places that I'm naming. We went to Booker T. Washington's National Monument in Hardy, Virginia, Booker T. Washington Landmark in Maiden, West Virginia, Carter G. Woodson's Memorial in Huntington, West Virginia, Carter G. Woodson Center, Berea College, Kentucky. Muhammad Ali, which is one of your favorites, boyhood home and landmark and museum and cultural center in Louisville, Kentucky. We went to Brown versus Board of Education National Historical Site in Topeka, Kansas. We went to Dr. George Washington Carver's exhibit in Minneapolis, Kansas. Not Minneapolis, Minnesota, Minneapolis, Kansas. Buffalo Soldiers Monument, Junction City, Kansas. Dr. George Washington Carver National Historical Monument, Diamond, Missouri. We went to John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. Little Rock Central High School National Center, Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock 9 Memorial at the State Capitol, Little Rock, Arkansas. National Civil Rights Museum at Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, where Dr. King was assassinated. The National Civil Rights Museum at Slave Haven Underground Railroad Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. The 16th Street Baptist Church Bombing Memorial at Birmingham, Alabama. The National Peace and Justice and Reconciliation Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, which is called the Lynching Memorial. So those are the places that we visited. And as you said, these places can take a toll on us, but we hadn't planned on visiting these places. We just planned on taking the trip. And once we named the places that we decided to go to, once we went to the first place in West Virginia, we was like, man, this is deep, because this is a real rural town in 2020. How does Carter G. Woodson come out of this little rural town in the mid-1800s? So I'm driving, and Mutala, who's authored several books. This is my first endeavor on writing the book, but he has authored several books, how to learn Arabic, how to understand the Quran, different type of books in terms of historical significance. So he said, do you have a pencil and a pad? I said, yeah, I keep one in my glove compartment. So he just started writing stuff down. So as we went to these different places, while we're driving, we're discussing these things in depth. My background, I have a master's in international relations. I'm a former intelligence officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency. His background, he worked for USAID as a diplomat. So we've traveled around the world. We've seen some things. I spent 26 years in the Air Force, as you know. So we know some things. So as we discuss these things.
Can I just cut in for 1 second, Kev?
Sure.
So you've admitted to one thing that I've always said for over the years and that you've never admitted to before, that you're a spy. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So that we did these things, man. And as we went, we were learning what these people had to go through to get educated, and they always, not only them, Carter G. Woodson, Dr. George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, and John Hope Franklin, who we concentrated on, these particular people, even though we went to all these different places, we concentrated on them because their background, their history, how they came to become who they became is a miracle.
Right.
It's a miracle. These guys were in their early teens when they walked away from these little teeny rural towns in the mid-1800s when they was lynching people just for breathing.
Right.
So as you was asking the question, it took an emotional toll on us after, and we wasn't even really paying attention to it. You keep going to these places, you keep seeing these horrible things, you keep going in and going in. After a while, we were like, man, this is tough. I mean, towards the end, Octavius Mutala couldn't go into the lynching museum. He said, I'm spent, but I can't go. Actually, my daughter, who lived in Birmingham, drove down to Montgomery and went in with me, because I had to document, because we had started this book thing. I said, I got to document this, and then the next day, I wake up like 2 a.m, just tearing up because I'm seeing a place where over 5,000 recorded lynchings. We're not talking about ones that are not recorded. We're talking about 5,000 recorded lynchings for 40 years. Every week, someone's being lynched. And if you're a human being with any kind of empathy in you, it will touch you, and it touched us.
Right. So I just want to touch on something real quick. And before the place I couldn't remember was Surratt and the Surratt House. But speaking of that, I can't remember, once again, my memory fails me, but there was a HBO kind of sci-fi thing, and it focused on Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then with the recent presidential visit there as well, it's kind of funny that that was one of the places that you visited, and now Tulsa, Oklahoma is coming back in the forefront of our mind right now. Did you think about that as you was going, like, man, we just were there and now people are actually thinking about this place?
Well, most definitely. I mean, it's like, this book is so timely because the things that we're discussing now, like Black Wall Street, like monuments, like Confederates monuments, there's reasons why these things were put up, especially after Reconstruction, when you've seen where African Americans have made these achievements, the whites pushed back on that.
Right.
Because these statues of Confederate soldiers were not put up during the Civil War era. They came afterward as a response to people like Carter G. Woodson and George Washington Carver being able to achieve so much things, Black Wall Street, people being able to do these things under these horrible conditions, but yet they were able to do it. That pushback came, and that's why these statues and things came up. So yeah, man, when you look at what's going on today, this book kind of predates, the stuff that people are talking about. We didn't know George Floyd was going to happen.
Right.
We
Right.
didn't know, this situation would happen when we went to write this book.
And like you said, one of the things I noticed were the three people, even though it's not just them, their experience, but the three people you talk about is Booker T. Washington, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and Dr. George Washington Carver. And I hate to say, and I quote unquote call myself a historian and a student of political science, I was not familiar with Dr. Woodson.
Well, yeah, Dr. Carter G. Woodson is, quote unquote, the father of Black history.
Okay.
He was the one that did the Black History Week, and then came the Black History Month. So Carter G. Woodson, in the line of the great, African historians like Sheikh Ante Diop, Ivan Van Sertima, John Henry Clark. Before them there was Carter G. Woodson, who documented these historical things so we would know today. His most important book was The Miseducation of the Negro. Right. Because even though we were trying to achieve and learn, to get educated, we was getting educated by the people who enslaved us. And so which he had to coin the book, write the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, because they were not going to educate you something to free your mind. They was going to educate you to something to psychological chain your mind. So that's why, he is so important, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. But also, Booker T. Washington in his own right is very important, because the debate between Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois was, W.B. Du Bois says, there's the time of the 10th. People can become doctors, people can become all these things. Booker T. Washington says, hey, pull yourself by your bootstraps, learn a trade. That's why a lot of the historical Black universities were institutes, technical colleges, agriculture colleges. They was learning trade.
Right.
But the most important person for me in this whole thing was Dr. George Washington Carver. This is just a self-evident truth, Jeff. I believe that Dr. George Washington Carver is the greatest mind that this country has ever produced. And I'm rating him above Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford. Even if you want to throw Albert Einstein in there has never been a mind on this planet, this is just my opinion, like that of Dr. George Washington Carver, who was stolen from his home as a child. He was a slave. He was stolen from his slave master, him and his mother, as a child. And the slave master brought him back, but he never saw his mother again. He came out of that situation and became the premier scientist in agriculture, where but Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, all these people wanted this information. Actually, the USDA as we know it today is that way because of Dr. George Washington Carver. He could actually, I mean, if it would have been at another time, Jeff, you would say he was a prophet because he had the ability not to talk to plants, but to communicate with plants.
Right.
Because we know what he did with a peanut and a sweet potato. Come on.
Right. Right.
I mean, he transformed agriculture. And the beautiful thing was that Booker T. Washington was able to bring this great mind to Tuskegee, a little small college.
Right.
But he played on Dr. George Washington Carver, who was a staunch Christian, just a good person. And he played on that and said, hey, how can you go to these universities and when we need you down south to help these African-American farmers learn agriculture? So it's my opinion that this man, if people go in and read about him, one of the sad tragedies of Dr. George Washington Carver, if you go online and Google his voice, there's still recordings of his voice. He sounds like a little girl because he was castrated as a child.
Wow.
The people don't know that about him.
I did not know that.
He was castrated as a child. And there were different reasons why he was castrated, but he was. But all that stuff that he went through, he became Dr. George Washington Carver, the greatest mind this country's ever produced.
So we kind of talked on how many stops you made, but how many miles did you guys travel? How many different states did you visit to get this information?
Well, we traveled over 3,000 miles, and it was enjoyable, because we were talking, stopping at these different places. Actually, there's a chapter in this book about all the places that we stopped to eat, because when you go into these places, we want to go where our folks eat, Topeka, Kansas, down in Missouri and all these different places. So, I mean, we drove a lot. We put a lot of miles and we booked hotels ahead of time. We know we had to stay on schedule to get to where we need to get, to do these things. So it was grueling. From an emotional standpoint, it was very grueling, especially when we got toward the end.
Even with that, and I know things are different nowadays, so when I came here from Las Vegas, and I traveled with my family here from Las Vegas to Maryland, Washington, D.C. area. Even in the 1990s, I planned my trip around military bases because I was going through the South. Yeah. I wanted to stay at or near a military base. Did anything like that come into your mind when you were traveling? I know we're, 30 years past that.
Yeah, but it came into our mind. We packed all our goodies. We packed all the water, and I'm a health food guy, so I got all the healthy things in me. We stayed at places that we knew would have a gym and that sort of thing. But also, we packed a shotgun.
Right. Okay.
We traveling through all Missouri.
Right.
We went to West Virginia. We went to all these different places. And you can't bring a handgun to these different states, but you can travel anywhere with a shotgun.
Right.
So, I mean, and nothing happened. Everybody was really receptive. All the people were really, the people at these museums were excellent in giving us information. The people who work for parks and stuff like that were excellent in telling us the things about things that we didn't even know. But yeah, we traveled, in the daytime. We didn't travel at night.
Right.
We got to our places before sundown because some of these places still have sundown town. So we were moving.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Well, we already talked about you visited Louisville, Kentucky. Like I said, that's one of my personal heroes. Home, Muhammad Ali, and then this was after his death. Were there monuments or things there documented that Ali came from Louisville? Oh, yeah. Is he given a hero's? He's given a hero's place in his hometown.
Well, without a doubt. First of all, they preserved his house. It's a little pink house. And we got pictures of all that stuff in our book. But also, they have they have a museum in Louisville, Kentucky that is done right. I mean, it is beautiful, and it's done right with all the history of Muhammad Ali, how he came to be. One of the things that struck me about this museum, not only was it visited by African Americans, it was international, because I could tell by the garb that people were wearing, especially the Muslims that were from Pakistan,
Right.
Indonesia, Asia, that came to that. It was packed.
Right.
On a middle of the week. It was packed because people revere Muhammad Ali for what he stood for as a human being.
Right. So, you did this travel. I'll tell you what, I'm going to say this question real quick. Is there any pertinent or important facts that you want to talk about in the book right now as we get towards the end, but I still have about 2 questions. Is there some pertinent facts that you, as one of the authors, just want to bring up?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we try to wrap our minds around when you look at the Education Enigma, and when we wrote the book, in a way where we just put the information out, and we didn't try to give our opinions on things. We just try to educate, and then you come with an opinion. What we did, similar to what Malcolm X had done, we were indicting America for this hypocrisy, where education will free you. Yet while education is going to free me, you are trying to hold me back from getting this education by gerrymandering, by voters, same stuff that's going on now.
Right. Right.
So the enigma is that while we were trying to be educated, we were being held back. Even though we still were able to achieve, we were being held back.
We talked briefly about George Floyd. One of the most profound things with George Floyd's passing, and I don't know if you listened to it, was Reverend Sharpton when he gave his eulogy. And he talked about them having his knee on his neck. And he said, George Floyd, it was Black America. He said, how could we move along and you guys have had your knee on our necks for 400 plus years?
Right.
And that I thought that was one of the most profound. I don't think other people heard it.
Yeah,
but I heard that. You've had your knee on our neck for 400 years. How can we accomplish all that we are able to accomplish with your knee on our neck?
Yeah. A lot of these schools that, Carter G. Woodson graduated from Harvard.
Right, I saw that. Yeah. I was shocked that he was able to attend Harvard. Yeah. I was shocked.
Him and W. Du Bois go to Harvard. Booker T. Washington walked to Hampton Institute from his hometown. Walked. Yeah. So, and the whole time they are being terrorized.
Right.
I mean, terrorized, hanging, burning, lynching, you name it. These things were happening to these folks. Yet people are saying that, it's like starting a race. You've been athletic. It's like starting a race. They're starting at the 80-yard line and you're running 100 yards.
Right.
So, the advantages that are there, and also the thing that was really important that we realized towards the end. What is the reason for a lot of these places that we visit are being maintained by white Americans? What is the reason for that? And we came to the conclusion, you can make your own conclusion when you read the book, was that it's like Confederate statues. It's a reminder that we used to own you.
Right.
We used to do these things to you. We had the ability to control your freedom for hundreds of years. So that's why when you go, to Minneapolis, Kansas, and this little place has all these magnificent artifacts of enslaved African Americans. And this town is probably 99% white. So they're visiting these places.
Right.
And they're visiting places. We may be looking at it from a psychological standpoint, but look at what we achieved. They may be looking at it from a whole different perspective. Look at what we did.
Right. So as we go to close, I'm going to ask you this one question. As you went on this journey, what is the legacy of visiting these type of places or these places in history, and what's the effect of white supremacy and slavery on today's society? And that includes Black people, African Americans, white people, and our culture as it exists today.
Yeah. But there's another book that's a great book that's by Dr. Naim Akbar called The Psychological Change of Slavery. In slavery, after they took the chains off, they didn't have to worry about Black folks because they had indoctrinated them to a point that we were psychologically enslaved. You know, like Malcolm says, who taught you to hate yourself?
Right.
You know, and that's why Dr. Carter G. Woodson came with the miseducation of the Negro. We have to re-educate ourselves. We have to look at what we have gone through is post-traumatic stress syndrome. You understand what I'm saying? After a while, you know, this takes a profound effect on the descendants of enslaved Africans' psyche. You know, so what we noticed was that what we have to do as a people is to re-educate ourselves. You know, because we put our kids in these schools and they've been educated by people who really don't have our best interests at heart. You know, because why do we understand, you know, about the red badge of courage, the pearl, all these required readings of prominent European American authors, but they don't know anything about the Notes to the Native Son.
Right.
You know, Go Colored on the Mountain. They don't know about Baldwin or Richard Wright, you know, or Claude McKay, our great authors, because integration never happened. Assimilation happened. We
Right.
assimilated into the major culture. We didn't integrate. They didn't give up anything. We gave up everything.
Right. So one of my final questions is there a plan for a sequel? And then I say that considering that you, like I, live here in Maryland, and then there is so much history of African Americans in this area, Frederick Douglass, the auctions, and you know all the things that are on the Eastern Shore. You know, Lincoln declared martial law here in D.C. because he didn't want to be surrounded from both sides by slave states, which most people don't realize Maryland was a slave state.
So, you know, tomorrow, which is, in 2 days, it'll be the 17th of July, which is the anniversary of this book. And what we had planned to do in June of this year, before the COVID hit, was to trace the Underground Railroad from here up into Canada. We were going to go all the way into Nova Scotia, but you know, Canada shut the border, so we can't go there. You know, the COVID is,
right,
you know, all over the place. But yeah, we planned that we had mapped out some other places going north and see what the, you know, what happened there and how did the Canadians, you know, how did it, you know, enslave, the ancestors of enslaved Africans in Canada, how did they, you know, deal with the same things that we were dealing with in the South? Because, you know, Malcolm X always say, if you're south of the Canadian border, you're south.
Right. So, okay, Kev, once again, I thank you for coming to the Underground. I appreciate you having here, and I'm quite sure I'm going to have you back. Anybody who watches this particular content, please go ahead and get yourself a hard copy or e-copy of Education Enigma. I appreciate the effort that you put in that book in educating African Americans about our journey. That is one of the things that we forget. And when people are talking about history and Black history, my goal, what I think we need to do is when we have Black History Month and we have history, I think the actual real path to go is our inclusion in overall history. We don't need a separate month. We need our history put into the history of this country. Because
it is American history. Our history is American history. We are
right.
the American story. You know, we
right.
are the great American story.
So,
you know, this country was built on the back of our people. So we are the real American story. You know, like we're as American as mom's apple pie, you know, Chevrolet, you know what I mean?
Right. I'll leave it and I'll close it. you know, we both served in the military, and I will tell you, I am a loyal American. I love this country, but African Americans have a different relationship with a country than other people do. I'm going to quote Chris Rock. We love America, but our love is different. To us, America is like that uncle that paid to send you to college, but raped you as a child.
That's right.
so all right. Thanks. Like I said, we'll have you on another show, Kev. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. I mean, I really appreciate the platform. I appreciate the work you're doing in the community. We need more of this, you know, so we can tell our story. We don't need other people telling our story. We can tell our own story.
So, all right, Kev. So if you can just hold on, I'm going to go ahead and end. If you like the content of The Underground, please like, share. This is it for The Underground, and we'll come back again soon. Thank you.